This is the Shopware Hub Cast, where your host Sander Mangel and Dennis Höting, resident community hub expert and director of product development at Shopware, uncover the stories of the people that make our community. This episode, they talk to Benjamin Eberlei, founder and performance detective at Tideways, hosting the Undercover LPHPant podcast and contributing to Doctrine and PHP open source projects.
Benjamin, thank you so much for joining. Really pleasure to have you with us here. I think most people know you, but most people know you as the Tideways guy, you as a founder. It didn't start out that way, right? So can you maybe take us back to the beginning? How did you get started with your Shopware journey?
Yes, you're right. My Shopware journey started many, many years ago when I was primarily working on the Doctrine ORM. And Shopware decided to use the ORM as base of their database abstraction in Shopware version 5. So when they made initial decisions and had questions about the architecture and the way they wanted to design it, we came together and talked about that, and I had some ideas and provided them with some input. And so this is the first time I came in contact with Shopware. And then a year later, 2 years later, I started working for a consultancy called Quafu, and we worked directly with Shopware on the Shopware 5 core then. That was around 2013-14. So I worked on the Doctrine, Symfony, and Zen framework sort of interactions between Shopware and using those open source frameworks. Yeah, so my journey didn't start with anything e-commerce related, but coming from like sort of the open source technology that Shopware is based on. Yeah, and we always had a lot of fun at the core team, and I gave them a lot of ideas about doing things. When I started Tideways and didn't work so much anymore with Shopware, at some point, Oliver Skroblin came back to me like early in the stage of Shopware 6 and gave me access to the repository and asked how this would look like. And that like really blew my mind, like how Symfony focused and based on top like the architecture was, and I really liked it. Yeah, so that was sort of my second connection with Shopware through the version 6 then. Yeah. And then obviously through my company Tideways, we do performance monitoring, PHP profiling, and a lot of our customers use Shopware. So we often interact with Shopware, but mostly based on questions of performance and improvements and this kind of stuff. That's mostly my lens looking at Shopware.
You are really deeply into the PHP space most of all, right? That is I think really your background, right? So to date, how many Shopware projects have you implemented for clients?
Not a single one. So we have our Shopware demo shop that we run to test our Tideways integration. And then like I don't have a lot of practical experience except like talking to developers working for our customers at agencies. And so I mostly have second-hand knowledge, I would say.
Well, I think maybe to that point. And I do like that you don't do implementation, you just go straight to the core, right? At least for Shopware 5. I like that. Screw those projects. Let's change the product itself. But I think your insights are unique, right? Because you must be seeing so many Shopware 6 shops, probably with all their challenging implementations, which gives you, I do think, a very deep perspective on how Shopware 6 works.
Yes, yeah, I would say, yeah. Especially, I would guess sort of like repeated things that happen, that many people are doing the same things slightly differently, for example. So special things like price calculation or stock updates, or so everybody has their own take on that. HTTP caching is an interesting thing to see how everybody is doing that. And so that's a nice thing to see.
Right, amazing. And I think one other thing that I always admire about you is you have your own company, you have many clients, you develop a product, and you still find time to do a lot of contributions to the Shopware community and beyond. How do you manage that?
So mostly this is about hiring people that take off the work that prevents me from doing that. So I'm mostly looking at like, I want to do this. So I want to contribute to open source. I want to work with the community, and then just building everything around making this possible in a way. That's probably a unique position that you are in if you have sort of the resources by having your own company. I've got so much from the PHP community, from other open source communities built on top. So PHP itself, Doctrine and Symfony are sort of my core communities, I guess, that I participate in. And I have gotten so much from that. And especially with the success of the company, also being like PHP based company, so providing technology for PHP, it was always my goal to give back as much as possible, because that's I guess just a good thing, sort of like being in this unique position to be able to do that and having had so much positive things coming from the community towards me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think that's also maybe a testament to open source, right? That it actually allows companies like Tideways to step in and do something they're very, very good at. Right. So there's very little to benchmark on a closed source system shop. Not to say that they don't have performance issues, but you can't. Right. And I think that is definitely, for me at least, one of the benefits of working with open source solutions, that you can actually go in, start to fiddle under the motor hood and really understand what's going on.
Yes. Whenever we find something in customer shops, which points towards like problems in the shopware core, then I'm always happy to invest the time to roll this back to the shopware core. And we had quite a few contributions in this regard already, and also discussions with the core team about certain things that we see often. And also the shopware core team use that input sometimes to improve things. So I really like this sort of symbiotic relationship, and then giving back to the shopware core or to other open source systems, and making them better for everyone, so everybody can benefit from what we found.
I think what just what I think is really beneficial here as well, when you are investigating, or you and your team are investigating and contributing in the end, is also about getting some learnings, right? It's discovering, this is a good approach to a certain problem or something like that. And I think, as you basically already pointed out, sharing is caring, right?
Yeah.
I know that you put some blog articles, for example, already into Community Hub, sharing this with the whole community. And I think this is also, besides code contribution, really a great contribution to the community after all. If you're like learnings, like writing about those learnings, then sharing it with the community, everybody can learn from that. And it's for, the greater good of community after all. So that's really cool as well.
Yeah, I really like leveling everybody up and making it possible that all can benefit from the knowledge that we find. Our sort of business model is not based on keeping this kind of knowledge a secret. We have an incentive to share it, or we build it in a way where we have an incentive to share it as well. So that's I really like it this way.
That's like the core nature of open source, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
I think being in the shopware ecosystem, we sometimes forget we are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So we owe a lot to Vue.js, to Symfony, but even to low-level systems like Linux even, and especially PHP, I think, right? We owe our entire existence to that. I know you are quite active in the PHP space. Can you talk a little bit about the PHP Foundation and what it is, why that might be interesting for people in the shopware space?
Yeah, so PHP is quite a unique language, even across all the open source languages like Python, Ruby, and C#, Rust, and stuff. So PHP has actually nobody who is in control of the language, and all decisions that affect the language sort of have evolved through like a sort of democratic system of sorts, but also a system of merit, where at the moment bigger changes that are made need to be voted on by the, let's say, active set of contributors in a way, and it needs to be 2/3 majority, and then changes can go into the language. But other than that, there's really no ownership in PHP itself. So it's a to that degree, very, very unique open source project, because not a lot of projects do it this way. And then given PHP is also like a super big project and so many people depend on it. So what happened was that there were 2 people that were employed by companies that worked on PHP core, but not more than that. Everything else was voluntarily. And then one of those 2 people, Nikita Popov, decided that he wanted to move in the direction of working with like C-Lang compiler and Rust as a language. So he wanted to leave the company he worked for that allowed them to work on PHP. And this led to the ecosystem sort of coming together, and we started a foundation for PHP. And that was only 4 years ago or 3 years ago. I'm not sure yet, 100%. So it's not very long ago that we created this PHP Foundation. The PHP Foundation has actually no control over PHP language. So it's still this process I described before. What the PHP Foundation does is it finds sponsors, and primarily we are looking here for company sponsors. And then we collect money, and then we use that to pay developers to work on PHP core. And this whole process has been super successful. So we have a few big companies, can always be more. So if you're interested in doing that, look at this. Shopware, for example, is also one big sponsor of the PHP Foundation. Then Tideways, my company is, JetBrains, WordPress, Zen, GoDaddy, and just a few of them, the big private packages. And so I am part of the board, the administrative board of the foundation. And our goal is to like extend the reach of this foundation to be able to employ more developers. At the moment, we can employ 10 developers working on PHP core. So it's a huge increase to what was previously possible. And this made the language quite stable. So much more big bug fixes, more things that can be worked on. And it's a huge improvement for the ecosystem. So that's, I guess, a general success story of PHP as a language. And we can be very sure that sort of the core of the language will be developed further because of the foundation.
Yeah, it's amazing work what they're doing. I think it's funny, right? Because we all know PHP, we all work with it, and I think we sometimes forget that it's a relatively small team behind it.
Yes.
Of very amazing people. I remember I was, I think, 19 or something like that, and I went to PHP Benelux, and I was standing outside, back in the day still smoking, talking to this guy. And somebody said, okay, who are you? What do you do? He said, I'm Anthony Ferrara. And I do some stuff on PHP. And I said, you're a PHP developer. And I remember he said, no, primarily I'm a C developer. And I was like, I did it. I was young, I was dumb, I was naive, so I didn't get it. And then I started to look, and I just and only then I realized that all these people that are maintaining PHP probably don't really write a lot of PHP. They only write C.
No, they mostly write C.
Super funny. I think it's a great initiative, the PHP Foundation, and definitely people listening should look up more about it, because it's a good initiative. So a lot of contributing, a lot of long hours, a lot of travel. What keeps you going, especially in the shopware space? What is your driver to keep?
So I love the friendly community in the shopware development space. I met a lot of very great people. For example, the people organizing the Shopware Unconference, like Claudia, Carmen, Rico, and Fabian, and then a lot of people working on Shopware Core. So I know a lot of them from a long time ago. Dennis, for example, I know you for quite a while, and then I also keep touch with Shopware developers. So that's something I really like, keeps me going. I like going to the hackathons and community conferences and meeting people there. And then I really like the overall aim of the Shopware project for like technical excellence and like building on top of Symfony and really attempting to build something very well engineered. Obviously, given such a big project, at some points, there's also things that rattle a little bit or not working perfectly. But overall, I think the community is really trying to build software projects of big excellence, of excellent quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you published a bit on the community hub. Do you think that is also filling maybe a little bit of a gap that we had before, like having a central place to interact with the community?
Yes, in general, I think it's important as an open source project to facilitate ways for contributors and users to interact with each other. And the community hub is a really great idea. When I used it like the first few times over the last weeks, I was really happy about like the way it's implemented and what it makes available as features. So, and I mean, it's sort of its completely own product. It's sort of a social network of a way. And for a project like Shopware to have this kind of ecosystem platform, something quite unique. Other ecosystems need to be based on like open source software. So Shopware, as being a company, they have just other resources of trying community things out.
I remember in the early days, it was never a discussion about can we afford doing that. It was rather a discussion of can we afford not doing that.
Yeah.
So everybody was like fully invested, and it was from day one seen as, okay, this is going to be a product on its own and something really important for the community, as we see the open source community as our core. That's like really, really important. And what I was amazed about is the fact that in the beginning, we had a rough idea of we want to connect those different sources and we want to provide learning material. And we had a quick and simple idea about that and just implemented something, rapid prototyping, and then got into contact with community members early. This is when the great ideas really sparked. And we got like, hey, this could be cool. And hey, you should create a connection to that. And hey, the gamification, we should emphasize this. And this is something that community really values. And we should have a kudos and appreciation on all those ideas. And let's say a majority of those ideas really stem from the community interacting with each other, because those are the people that know how it should be. And that was really cool input. That was fun.
Yeah, I think that's a benefit of open source communities or bigger communities in general. If you have so many different lenses on a problem and people are used to talking to each other, then you can just feed off your own ideas and build on top of each other. And that usually allows to find like really great solutions that like smaller teams can't find on their own.
Yeah, definitely. That's like, again, the nature of open source, really. Yeah, that's cool.
So maybe on the contributing part, if there are people out there listening and they think, I want to contribute something, I want to get started somewhere, what would be your recommendation or your top tip for them to get started? Because it can be a little bit daunting at times, I think.
Yeah. So a few things I think I would recommend if you are thinking about contributing to an open source community is that first, you should work on something that helps yourself. So if you're at an agency or at an e-commerce company with a Shopware store, you have some things that you want to improve on Shopware. I guarantee you probably have a list. Then you start doing that. If you run into problems like bugs in the core or something like that, maybe look at them because it helps yourself. You have some kind of motivation to get that finished. The reason for this is that in open source communities, because you have so many eyes on things, contributions to topics means that there will be a lot of discussion and you have to defend your changes. And the smaller they are and the more motivated you are, the higher the possibility that you put it over the finish line. You should start with small things to learn about the code base, the architecture. Maybe don't start contributing directly in the core package, but on the smaller ones on the outside, because they have a lower barrier for getting code merged. Let's say, for example, the Friends of Symphony code bases and maybe other open source plugins, and then work yourself towards the core where you need more knowledge. Also, you need to have more time for the politics and for people discussing things with you. Then I would always recommend hanging around community spaces, Discord now, obviously, and not Slack anymore, but Hub, the Shopware community hub, and then to get to know people. And personally, like my breakthrough in open source was by meeting people in person. So I went to conferences and I really decided I wanted to learn about these people. I want to talk to them. I want to go to them and ask them questions, even though like I I was very afraid of doing that. Usually you get very good responses, very nice responses from people working on core, working on projects, and they are really happy about talking to like really everybody because they have learned that getting all this information from the ecosystem helps them make better decisions. So they are really eager to talk to you, learn about how you use it, what problems you run into. And they can give you input on where to start on problems, how to keep them small so that they can get finished. And yeah, that's also a motivating factor if you know the people. And then don't be afraid to ask for feedback on your code. Just make it open source yourself. Small plugins, try things out, ask about feedback, what other people think about it to learn more and get better.
Yeah, amazing. That's super valuable information. I think anyone should follow that. And I agree. I think contributing to core code is not that the code is more complex, right? But there's so many edge cases that you need to think about, and it needs to work in so many different scenarios and what have you. And there's probably a good reason why things are done in a certain way, maybe not even the most optimal way. That it takes a lot of context and tenacity to contribute to that.
Yeah, I remember the first time I got excellent on an open source project when I started working with the Zen framework. And at that time, they have taken on too much code. And so it had too much components, too few contributors. So there were a lot of open bug reports. And then the Zen, the company behind it, they sponsored sort of like bug squash events. So 1 week, I guess. And then the people that like had the most fixed bugs, they would get a t-shirt. So I had a vacation in that week. So I took vacation on that week and only coded on Zen framework bugs. I think I got over 90 bugs or something closed. Many of them because they were not relevant anymore stuff or duplicates of stuff, but also a lot of code, and then learned a lot about things that were really small changes, but you start to learn things by that. And then you can use that knowledge to start contributing changes or improvements.
I love that. Who needs vacation where you can get a t-shirt, right?
Yes,
It's getting your priorities straight.
definitely.
Thank you, Benjamin, for sharing that. I think it was amazing to hear about your journey and what you have
Thanks for inviting.
experienced so far. And we're very grateful for all your contributions, and we're looking forward to the ones yet to come. And it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. It was really fun.
Thank you.